The world outside, with its sharp edges and insistent hum, began to dissolve with the very first step. It was a step taken from a place of noise and hurry onto a path that promised only quietude. The boundary was not marked by a gate or a sign, but by a subtle, yet profound, shift in the very substance of the ground. One moment, the sole of a shoe met the unyielding firmness of the common world. The next, it sank ever so slightly into a bed of deep, resilient moss that carpeted a series of ancient gray stones. The stones were arranged not in a severe, straight line, but in a gentle, meandering curve that seemed to have been decided by the forest itself, a suggestion rather than a command. They were old stones, weathered by countless seasons, their surfaces softened by time and cloaked in a velvet of the richest green. This was the entrance, the soft threshold into a different kind of existence. The air itself felt different here, cooler and heavier, carrying a fragrance that was at once cleansing and ancient. It was the scent of pine needles, sharp and clean, mingling with the deep, loamy perfume of damp earth and decaying leaves, a rich tapestry of woodland aromas that spoke of life and decay in a continuous, gentle cycle. A sound, or rather the profound absence of it, was the most immediate sensation. The relentless thrum of the distant world faded into an almost imperceptible background hum, replaced by the subtle symphony of the forest. It was a silence that was not empty, but filled with the quiet, deliberate sounds of nature. Far above, the canopy of colossal trees formed a vaulted ceiling, a living cathedral of green and brown that filtered the afternoon sun into 1,000 shifting beams of liquid gold. These rays of light did not glare, but rather drifted down through the leaves, illuminating floating motes of dust and pollen like tiny benevolent spirits dancing in the still air. The only distinct sound was the whisper of a breeze, a high, soft sigh that rustled the uppermost leaves, a sound so gentle it seemed to be the forest breathing. This profound quiet had an immediate and palpable effect on the mind, washing over it like a cool, clear stream, carrying away the residue of anxious thoughts and hurried plans. It was an invitation to slow down, to match one's own breath to the slow, steady respiration of the trees. One particular detail caught the eye, a testament to the patient artistry of this place. On the edge of a large, flat stone, a single fern frond had unfurled in a perfect, delicate spiral. Its color was a vibrant, almost luminous green, a stark contrast to the deep, shadowed tones of the moss around it. Each tiny leaflet was perfectly formed, holding a miniature world of veins and texture. A single drop of water, perhaps left from a morning mist, clung to its very tip, a perfect crystalline sphere that captured the entire forest in its tiny reflection. It held the light, refracting it into a minuscule rainbow, a fleeting jewel in the deep green quiet. To observe it was to feel a connection to the slow unfolding processes of life, to the immense patience of the natural world that could create such intricate, effortless beauty. It was a small thing, a detail that could be easily missed, but here, in this place of heightened awareness, it felt like a significant and beautiful secret being shared. This simple observation, the sight of that one perfect fern frond, triggered a cascade of feeling within. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated peace, a sense of profound rightness in being exactly here, at exactly this moment. The constant inner monologue, the restless critic that so often narrated the day, fell silent. In its place, there was only a quiet sense of awe, a feeling of being a small but welcome part of this immense living tapestry. There was no need to analyze or to understand, only to witness and to feel. The stillness of the forest seeped into the very marrow of the bones, loosening knots of tension that had gone unnoticed for far too long. It was a feeling of coming home, not to a physical place of walls and a roof, but to a deeper, more essential self that was often lost in the clamor of daily life. This feeling of peace was deeply connected to a sense of timelessness. The ancient trees, with their gnarled bark and impossibly high branches, seemed to stand outside of the frantic rush of human hours and days. They were keepers of a different kind of time, measured in seasons and centuries. To stand among them was to feel the comforting weight of that deep time, to understand that one's own worries and urgencies were, in the grand scheme of things, as fleeting as the motes of dust dancing in the sunbeams. A memory surfaced, unbidden, of a childhood spent playing in a small patch of woods behind a long-forgotten home. The memory was not sharp or specific, but rather a warm, diffuse glow of feeling, the remembered scent of pine, the sensation of cool moss under small hands, the feeling of being hidden and safe within a secret, green world. This forest felt like an echo of that place, a larger, more ancient version of that childhood sanctuary. A silent question formed in the heart, a rhetorical query directed at the quiet sentinels of the woods. How does one hold on to this feeling? How can this profound sense of peace be carried back into the world of noise and haste? But the question dissolved as soon as it formed, replaced by a simple, serene resolution. The point was not to capture it or to hold it, but simply to experience it, fully and without reservation. The intention became to simply be present, to walk this path not as a means to an end, but as the entire purpose of the journey, to feel each step, to breathe in the scented air, to observe the play of light and shadow without needing anything more. The only goal was to be a quiet, grateful witness to the beauty of this moment, to let the forest work its slow, gentle magic. In preparation for continuing the journey, there was a pause, a moment of conscious stillness. The eyes closed gently, shutting out the visual world for a moment to better focus on the other senses. A deep, slow breath was drawn in, filling the lungs with the cool, clean air. It felt as if it were not just oxygen being inhaled, but the very essence of the forest itself, its peace, its patience, its ancient life force. The breath was held for a long, silent count, a moment of perfect equilibrium, before being released in a slow, controlled sigh. The exhalation felt like a letting go, a physical release of all the accumulated tension, all the unspoken worries. The shoulders dropped, the muscles in the neck and back softened, and a sense of deep ease settled into the body. The first step was then taken, a deliberate and mindful movement. The foot lifted slowly, and was placed with care onto the next mossy stone in the path. The action was unhurried, almost ceremonial in its slowness. It was not a step of conquest or of progress, but a step of communion. The weight shifted gently, the body finding its balance in this new position. There was a conscious awareness of the connection between the foot and the ground, a feeling of being supported by the ancient solid earth beneath the soft cloak of green. Each subsequent step followed this same pattern, slow, intentional, and quiet, transforming the simple act of walking into a form of moving meditation. The journey was not measured in distance covered, but in moments of pure, sensory presence. The consequence of this gentle action was a deepening of the silence. The careful, soft placement of each footfall made almost no sound, preserving the sacred quiet of the place. The only sound was the soft whisper of clothing, a barely audible rustle that seemed to be absorbed instantly by the sound-dampening quality of the trees and moss. This lack of sound amplified the subtle noises of the forest, the distant melodic call of a bird, the faint skittering of some small, unseen creature in the undergrowth, the gentle creak of a branch high above as it swayed in the breeze. The world became a place of immense sensory richness, a place where the smallest details held a profound significance. The focus shifted entirely from the internal world of thoughts to the external world of sensation, and in that shift, a deep and abiding tranquility was found. The path continued to curve gently, leading deeper into the heart of the woods, each step a further surrender to its peaceful embrace. The journey continued, a slow and dreamlike progression through the verdant hall of trees. The stone path wound its way onward, a gray-green ribbon unfurling through the deep shadows. The air grew cooler still, and the light that filtered through the canopy became more diffused, softer, as if it were passing through stained glass. The forest felt older here, the trees even larger, their trunks like the mighty pillars of some long-forgotten temple. Their bark was a tapestry of textures, thick with mosses of a dozen different shades of green, and traced with the intricate patterns of lichens in silver and pale gray. The ground was a soft carpet of fallen pine needles, which muffled the already quiet footsteps into near non-existence. The world was reduced to the gentle rhythm of breathing and the slow, steady beat of a heart that had finally found its calm. After a time, the character of the path began to change. The mossy stones grew fewer, giving way to a new kind of walkway, one that seemed to float just above the forest floor. It was a path made of wooden planks, smooth and weathered to a soft silvery gray. They were laid side by side with meticulous care, forming a solid, reassuring surface that snaked its way between the ancient trees. The walkway was elevated on low, sturdy supports, lifting it above the damp earth, the ferns, and the tangled roots that crisscrossed the ground. The transition was seamless. The last stone of the old path was set at the exact same height as the first plank of the new one, an invitation to continue the journey without breaking stride. The feeling was one of being gently guided, of being carried forward by the thoughtful design of this hidden place. Stepping from the soft, yielding moss onto the hard, smooth wood was a distinct sensory event. The sound of the footfall changed immediately, from a soft, dull press to a low, resonant thrum, a hollow and pleasing note that echoed for a moment in the quiet air. The texture underfoot was entirely different, a firm, even surface that spoke of human hands and careful craftsmanship. Yet it felt perfectly at home here, not an intrusion but a harmonious addition. The wood was warm from the filtered sunlight, and it felt solid and safe. Walking on this elevated path offered a new perspective. The forest floor, with its intricate world of fallen leaves, tiny mushrooms, and creeping vines, could be observed from a slight remove, like looking down into a beautiful, complex diorama. It felt like floating, like drifting silently through the deep, green heart of the woods. This sensation of floating engendered a feeling of profound lightness, both physical and spiritual. It was as if the slight elevation from the ground also created a distance from the heavy burdens of the world. There was a sense of being untethered, free to simply move through this beauty without leaving a trace. The mind, already quieted by the deep peace of the forest, became even more still. Thoughts, when they arose, were like fallen leaves drifting on the surface of a clear, calm pool, passing by without creating a ripple. The path became a metaphor, a journey not just through a physical space, but through a landscape of inner peace. The focus remained on the simple, immediate sensations, the feeling of the sun-warmed wood beneath the feet, the sound of the gentle footfalls, the scent of the air, the sight of the endless green. The walkway began to curve more purposefully now, its winding path leading towards a subtle brightening in the distance. The dense canopy seemed to be thinning slightly ahead, suggesting an opening, a clearing in the deep woods. This subtle promise of a destination did not create impatience, but rather a soft, gentle sense of anticipation, a quiet curiosity about what this sacred path was leading to. The feeling was akin to the final pages of a beloved story, a sense of nearing a peaceful and satisfying conclusion. The heart felt open and receptive, ready to accept whatever beauty lay ahead. This was not a journey of striving or seeking, but of allowing, of being led to a place of rest and sanctuary that had been waiting all along. With this feeling of gentle anticipation, the steps remained slow and deliberate. The desire was not to rush towards the end, but to savor these final moments of the journey. Each plank of the walkway was a distinct part of the experience, each turn in the path a new and beautiful vista. A sense of deep gratitude arose, a thankfulness for the existence of such a place, for the quiet magic of the forest, and for the simple, profound gift of this moment of peace. It was a feeling so pure and complete that it required no words, a silent communion with the spirit of the woods. This was the culmination of the walk, this deep, internal state of contentment and grace, a feeling of being perfectly in tune with the world. Then, through a final curtain of leaves, it came into view. The walkway ended at a natural archway, a perfect, graceful curve formed from living bamboo stalks that had been gently woven together. The bamboo was a pale golden green, its smooth surface glowing softly in the light of the clearing. Draped over this arch, in a cascade of delicate blossoms, were flowering wisteria vines. Their flowers were a soft, dreamy shade of purple, hanging in long, fragrant clusters that swayed gently in the slightest breeze. The sight was breathtaking in its simple, organic beauty. It was not a grand or imposing entrance, but a soft and welcoming one, a portal that seemed to have grown directly from the heart of the forest. The final few steps were taken with a sense of reverence. The air around the archway was thick with the sweet, intoxicating perfume of the wisteria, a scent that mingled with the deeper, earthier fragrance of the woods, to create a perfume of pure enchantment. The light here was brighter, clearer, pouring into the small valley that lay beyond the arch. It illuminated the purple blossoms, making them seem to glow from within, and cast a warm, welcoming light on the path ahead. The sound of a soft, trickling water could be heard from somewhere beyond the gate, a gentle, musical murmur that promised even deeper tranquility. To stand before this archway was to feel on the threshold of a truly magical place, a hidden sanctuary dedicated to peace and healing. The consequence of this arrival was a feeling of complete and utter stillness. The journey was over, and a sense of profound peace, even deeper than what the forest had offered, settled over the soul. It was a moment of perfect arrival, of finding the place one had been searching for without even knowing it. The body stood motionless, simply absorbing the beauty of the scene, the scent of the flowers, the sound of the water, the warmth of the light. The mind was empty of all but the present moment, a state of pure, blissful awareness. This was the gentle arrival, the soft entry into the refuge that lay just beyond the veil of purple flowers. The journey through the woods had been a preparation, a shedding of the outer world, and this archway was the final, beautiful invitation to step into a place of true and lasting calm. Stepping through the archway of woven bamboo and cascading wisteria was like passing through a veil into another realm. The air on the other side was immediately different, holding a quality of stillness and warmth that was almost tangible, as if the very atmosphere was imbued with a deep and ancient calm. The small valley that opened up was a perfect circle of green, sheltered by the surrounding forest, and bathed in a soft, golden light. In the center of this clearing stood a low, rambling cottage, built from smooth, silvery wood and river stones, with a roof thick with living moss that made it seem as if it had grown from the earth itself. Thin wisps of fragrant smoke curled from a stone chimney, rising straight into the windless air. For a moment, there was only the sound of the gently trickling water, the hum of a few fat, lazy bees in the wisteria, and the soft beat of a calm heart. It was a picture of perfect, unassailable peace. Then, from the shaded porch of the cottage, 3 figures emerged. They did not appear suddenly, but rather seemed to coalesce out of the shadows, their movements so fluid and silent that they were simply not there one moment, and then they were. They were 3 women, each with an aura of timeless wisdom and profound kindness. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their feet making no sound on the wooden planks of the porch. They wore simple, long dresses of deep, earthy colors, one in the shade of moss, another the color of rich soil, and the third the deep blue of a twilight sky. Their hair was long and streaked with silver, braided with herbs and tiny star-like flowers. They did not speak, but as they drew nearer, their faces, etched with the fine lines of countless smiles, radiated a welcome that was more powerful and reassuring than any spoken word could ever be. It was a welcome that said, "You are safe here. You are expected. You are home." One of them, the woman in the moss-green dress, raised a hand, not in a wave, but in a slow, open-palmed gesture of peace. Her smile was gentle, creating a network of fine lines around eyes that held a deep and knowing light. There was a profound serenity in her gaze, a look of unconditional acceptance that instantly dissolved any lingering trace of uncertainty. The air around them seemed to hum with a soft, benevolent energy, a palpable field of tranquility that emanated from their very beings. It was not a magical force in a dramatic sense, but the simple, powerful magic of complete presence and goodwill. To be met with such a silent, heartfelt welcome was to feel seen, not for the persona one presented to the world, but for the quiet, essential self that lay beneath. A feeling of profound relief washed over the soul, a deep and complete surrender to the safety of this place and these guardians. The tension that often resides in the space between strangers, the subtle need to assess and be assessed, was entirely absent. There was no need for introductions, no need for explanations. The heart simply knew, with an unshakable certainty, that these women were keepers of a sacred peace, and that their only intention was to share it. A warmth spread through the chest, a feeling of being held and protected by their gentle presence. It was the feeling a lost child might have upon being found by the kindest of strangers. A sense of having finally arrived in a place of absolute safety after a long and weary journey. This feeling was reminiscent of a half-forgotten memory, the sensation of being tucked into bed by a loving grandmother. It was not a specific image, but a deep, cellular memory of warmth, the scent of dried herbs from a sachet on the pillow, and the comforting weight of a heavy quilt. It was the memory of being utterly cared for, of being able to let go of all worries and drift into a peaceful sleep, secure in the knowledge that one was loved and protected. These three women, with their silent smiles and serene energy, evoked that same profound sense of comfort and care. They felt like the grandmothers of the forest itself, their wisdom as deep and ancient as the trees that sheltered this sacred valley. A beautiful realization dawned in the quiet mind. In this sanctuary, words were a clumsy and unnecessary tool. Communication here happened on a much deeper level, a language of gesture, of presence, of shared intention. The smiles of the guardians spoke volumes, conveying warmth, compassion, and a complete understanding of the need for rest and renewal that had brought one to their doorstep. A silent vow was made to honor this quietude, to meet their silence with a receptive stillness, to allow the experience to unfold without the need for chatter or analysis. The only appropriate response was a feeling of deep, unspoken gratitude, a thankfulness that pulsed in the quiet chambers of the heart. In response to their gentle welcome, there was a slight, almost imperceptible bow of the head, a small gesture of respect and acknowledgement. A soft smile formed on the lips, a genuine and heartfelt reflection of the peace they so freely offered. The eyes, for a moment, closed, and a slow, deep breath was taken, inhaling the sweet, flower-scented air of the valley. It was an act of acceptance, a signal of readiness to receive the healing and comfort that this place promised. There was no hesitation, no reservation, only a complete and willing surrender to their gentle guidance. The woman in the earth-brown dress then made a slow, sweeping gesture with her arm, a clear and graceful invitation to follow them towards the cottage. She did not turn her back, but began to walk slowly, her gaze still warm and encouraging. The other two women fell into step, creating a small protective space for their guests to walk within. They moved together, not in a formal procession, but in a fluid and organic way, like leaves drifting on a gentle current. Their proximity was comforting, their serene presence a warm and protective cloak. The short walk from the archway to the cottage door was a journey in itself, a passage from the gentle wildness of the forest into the heart of its warmth and shelter. The sensory consequence of this brief, silent journey was a deepening of the peace that had already taken root. The soft hum of the bees seemed to grow more melodic, the scent of the wisteria more calming. The very ground felt solid and reassuring underfoot. The warmth emanating from the cottage grew stronger as they approached, a promise of the comfort that lay within its walls. The world seemed to shrink to the size of this small, sacred valley, a perfect, self-contained universe of tranquility. The worries and complexities of the outside world ceased to exist entirely, forgotten as completely as a dream upon waking. There was only this moment, this place, and the gentle, silent guidance of these three wise women. The heavy wooden door of the cottage swung open without a sound, revealing a space that was the very embodiment of warmth and comfort. The interior was bathed in the soft, flickering light of a fire that crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, and the warm glow of several beeswax candles placed in niches in the thick wooden walls. The air inside was a rich tapestry of scents, a complex and deeply comforting aroma of burning applewood, drying herbs that hung in bundles from the ceiling rafters, the sweet smell of beeswax, and the clean, grounding scent of lavender. It was a perfume that spoke of home, of safety, and of slow, peaceful days. The temperature was perfect, a gentle, enveloping warmth that seemed to seep directly into the bones, chasing away any lingering chill from the forest air. The three women guided their guests to a small, smooth wooden bench that stood just inside the door. It was a simple, beautifully crafted piece, its surface worn smooth by years of use. This was clearly a place of transition, a space designed for the deliberate act of shedding the outside world before entering fully into the sanctuary of the home. One of the women, the one in the twilight blue dress, gestured towards the bench with a soft smile, a clear, silent instruction to sit and to begin the ritual of arrival. The act of sitting on the solid, warm wood felt significant, a moment of grounding, of consciously beginning the process of letting go. Above the bench, a row of wooden pegs awaited the burdens of the journey. The process began with the shoes. The simple act of untying the laces was performed with a slow, mindful deliberation that it was rarely afforded. Each movement was careful and unhurried. The laces, still damp with the forest dew, were pulled loose, and the shoes were slipped off. Placing them on the stone floor beneath the bench felt like a profound release. They were the tools of the journey, the part of the self that had walked through the dust and hurry of the world. To remove them was to disconnect from that world, to declare that the journey was over and the time for rest had begun. Next came the jacket, a layer that served as a kind of armor against the unpredictability of the outside. The weight of it was lifted from the shoulders, and as it was hung on one of the smooth, wooden pegs, it felt as if a heavy, invisible weight was being lifted from the spirit as well. A bag, filled with the unnecessary necessities of the day, was placed beside the shoes, its contents and their attendant responsibilities instantly forgotten. This simple, physical act of disrobing created a powerful internal shift. It was a ritual of shedding, not just of clothing, but of roles, of expectations, of worries. With each item removed and set aside, the sense of self became lighter, simpler, more essential. It was a return to a more natural state of being, unencumbered by the trappings of a world that demanded constant performance and preparedness. The feeling was one of profound liberation, of being stripped down to a core of simple, quiet presence. There was a newfound awareness of the body, no longer constrained by restrictive clothing, and a deep sense of gratitude for this opportunity to simply be, without pretense or protection. This feeling of release was deeply connected to the idea of a sanctuary. A true sanctuary, the mind contemplated, is not just a beautiful place, but a space that allows and encourages this kind of shedding, this gentle and necessary vulnerability. It is a place where one can lay down their armor and be accepted without it. The cottage, with its warm fragrant air and the gentle, non-judgmental presence of its keepers, was the very definition of such a place. It felt as if the walls themselves were designed to absorb worry and exhale peace. The fire crackled in the hearth, a steady, rhythmic sound that was like the slow heartbeat of the home. And each pop and hiss seemed to say, "Rest now. You are safe." This contemplation culminated in a serene decision to fully embrace this process, to consciously let go of every last vestige of the outside world. It was a decision to trust this place and its guardians completely, to allow oneself to be cared for. This was not a passive act, but a conscious and willing participation in the ritual of comfort. The intention was to be as present and mindful in this simple act of changing clothes as one had been while walking the forest path, to find the sacred in these small, quiet moments of transition. As if sensing this decision, one of the women stepped forward. In her hands, she held a folded garment of the softest, thickest fabric imaginable. It was a robe, the color of rich cream, and it seemed to exude a gentle warmth even from a distance. She offered it with both hands, a silent gift. The gesture was slow and reverent, as if she were presenting a precious and sacred object. At the same time, another of the women placed a pair of soft woolen slippers on the floor beside the bench. They were simple and unadorned, but they promised a deep and gentle warmth. The robe was accepted with grateful hands. The fabric was even softer than it had looked, a heavy brushed cotton that felt like a warm cloud. The act of unfolding it released a faint, clean scent of sunshine and lavender. Slipping the arms into the wide sleeves and drawing the heavy fabric around the body was an experience of pure, unadulterated comfort. The weight of the robe was a comforting pressure, a gentle, reassuring hug that enveloped the entire body. It was like being wrapped in a cocoon of warmth and softness. The instant the robe was tied at the waist, a profound sense of belonging settled in. It was a uniform of peace, a signal that one was now a part of this quiet, gentle world. The final act was to slide the feet into the woolen slippers. The soft, natural fibers were warm and gentle against the skin, a perfect antidote to tired feet. To stand up from the bench, now clad in these garments of comfort, was to feel utterly transformed. The transition was complete. The person who had arrived, carrying the weight and the dust of the outside world, had been gently and lovingly unburdened, and a new self, softer and more serene, now stood in their place. The consequence of this simple ritual was a feeling of being completely and perfectly at ease, fully present in the warm, fragrant, firelit heart of the sanctuary. The world outside was a distant memory, and the healing journey within was just beginning. Now wrapped in the soft cream-colored robe, A profound sense of peace settled deep within the bones. The journey into the heart of the cottage began, guided by the silent, graceful presence of the woman in the twilight blue dress. She led the way from the small entryway, moving deeper into the main room of the dwelling, a space that felt both ancient and alive. The very air was a warm, fragrant balm, a complex and comforting blend of wood smoke, beeswax, and the subtle, layered perfumes of countless dried herbs. The dominant source of light was the magnificent fire that danced and leaped in the great stone hearth. Its light was a living thing, a fluid gold and orange that washed over the room, painting everything it touched with a soft, flickering glow. The firelight caressed the thick, hand-hewn wooden walls, making the deep grain of the ancient timber seem to shift and breathe. It created a mesmerizing play of light and shadow, long soft-edged shadows that stretched and swayed in the corners of the room, making the space feel both vast and intimately close. High above, massive wooden beams crossed the ceiling, their surfaces dark with age and smoke. From these beams hung dozens of bundles of dried plants, a rustic and fragrant tapestry that filled the upper reaches of the room. There were thick bunches of lavender, their purple heads still holding a whisper of summer fields, ropes of silvery sage, and delicate sprays of chamomile, their small white faces like fallen stars. As one moved through the room, the scent in the air would subtly change as one passed beneath a different herb, creating an ever-shifting olfactory landscape. The furniture was sparse but beautiful, each piece clearly made by a skilled and loving hand. A large rustic table stood in the center of the room, its surface scrubbed to a pale, silvery sheen. A few deep, comfortable-looking armchairs, draped with heavy, hand-woven blankets, were gathered near the warmth of the fire. The entire environment was a masterpiece of cozy, understated comfort, a space designed not for show, but for the deep and genuine nourishment of the soul. The woman in blue led the way to a more secluded corner of the room, an alcove that was set back from the main living area and enjoyed a more gentle, indirect light from the fire. Here, the atmosphere was even more tranquil, quieter, and imbued with a sense of sacred purpose. A few tall, thick beeswax candles stood on a small wooden table, their soft, steady flames contributing a honey-scented glow to the intimate space. And in the center of this peaceful nook stood the most remarkable bed one had ever seen. It was a massage table, yet it bore no resemblance to the clinical, sterile equipment of the outside world. This was a piece of the forest, an object of both functional purpose and profound natural beauty. Its frame was crafted from a single, massive piece of oak, its wood a deep, warm honey color. The surface had been polished over many years to a soft, lustrous sheen that seemed to glow from within, reflecting the flickering candlelight in long, gentle highlights. The legs were thick and solid, rooted to the floor as if they were still part of the living tree. But it was the surface of the bed that truly captured the imagination and took the breath away. There was no mattress in the conventional sense. Instead, the frame was filled with a series of thick, rectangular cushions that were made entirely of living moss. The moss was a deep and vibrant shade of forest green, a living velvet that looked impossibly soft and inviting. It was so dense and lush that it seemed to be a miniature landscape in itself, a perfect manicured section of a magical forest floor. Scattered across this verdant surface, like a fresh fall of blossoms, were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of fresh rose petals. They were in various shades of pale, creamy pink and ivory, their delicate silken texture a beautiful contrast to the deep green of the moss. The sight was exquisitely beautiful, a testament to the gentle artistic care that defined every aspect of this hidden sanctuary. It was not merely a place to lie down, it was an invitation to rest upon the very lap of nature. A feeling of quiet awe filled the heart. To see such a thing was to understand that the healing offered in this place was not a procedure or a service, but a form of communion, a deep and loving collaboration with the natural world. This was not a bed made for a person, but a bed made of the living earth, offered up as a place of rest. The very idea of it was profoundly comforting, a promise of a connection to something fundamental and true. The air in this small alcove was different too, carrying the cool, fresh, earthy scent of the moss and the faint, sweet perfume of the roses. It was a clean and gentle fragrance that was both grounding and uplifting, a scent that quieted the mind and soothed the spirit. This profound sense of wonder was connected to a deep, almost primal longing to return to the earth. There was a memory, more a feeling than a distinct image, of lying in a field of soft grass as a child, feeling the solid, comforting presence of the ground beneath, and watching the clouds drift by in the vast blue sky. It was a memory of perfect simplicity and belonging. This bed of moss and flowers felt like a direct invitation to recapture that feeling, to experience that same sense of being held and supported by the gentle strength of the earth. It was an offering of a return to innocence, a chance to reconnect with a part of the self that was often lost in the complexities of adult life. A serene resolution formed in the mind, to accept this beautiful offering with the same grace and love with which it was given. The intention was to be fully present for the experience, to pay attention to every sensation, to immerse the self completely in the unique comfort of this living bed. It was a conscious decision to let go of any and all expectations, to simply receive the gift of this moment with an open and grateful heart. This was not just a place to rest the body, but a place to rest the soul, and the soul felt ready, willing, and deeply thankful for the opportunity. With a final, encouraging smile, the guardian gestured towards the bed. The preparatory act was a simple one, a slow, deep breath, and a moment of quiet contemplation before this beautiful, natural altar of rest. The main action was the movement of sitting, and then gently, slowly, swinging the legs up and allowing the body to recline fully. The movement was unhurried, a deliberate and mindful surrender. The body lowered itself onto the surface, and the sensory consequence was immediate and astonishing. The moss, which had looked so dense and firm, yielded with a soft, springy resilience, molding itself perfectly to the contours of the body. It was like sinking into a cool, supportive cloud. It was not soft in a yielding, unsupportive way. Rather, it held the body with a firm but gentle pressure, a living cushion that seemed to know exactly what was needed. The coolness of the moss was the first and most surprising sensation, a refreshing and deeply pleasant feeling that seemed to draw away any lingering heat or inflammation from the body. It was the coolness of a shaded forest floor, a clean and vital sensation that felt instantly healing. And then there was the texture of the rose petals. They were like soft, scattered pieces of velvet against the skin, their delicate, silken touch, a beautiful and luxurious counterpoint to the cool freshness of the moss. Lying there, enveloped in these two contrasting but perfectly harmonious sensations, was an experience of pure bliss. The scents of earth and flowers rose up, creating a fragrant cloud that enveloped the senses. The body felt completely supported, perfectly held, as if it were floating on a cool, green flower-strewn pond. From this new perspective, lying in a state of supreme comfort, the world was transformed. The ceiling with its hanging herbs seemed like a canopy of a protective forest. The flickering firelight was a distant, dancing star. The focus shifted to the gentle movements within the room. One of the other guardians, the woman in the moss-green dress, approached the small table beside the bed. On the table sat a beautiful, simple ceramic bowl, a small wooden spoon, and several small earthenware pots. She moved with a quiet, focused grace, her hands sure and steady. It was clear that she was about to prepare something, and the simple act of watching her was in itself a form of meditation. She began by taking the small, beautifully imperfect ceramic bowl in one hand. It was the color of rich earth, with a simple, unadorned glaze on the inside. With her other hand, she opened one of the pots, and using the wooden spoon, scooped out a measure of a thick, vibrant orange paste. The rich, sweet scent that wafted from the pot was instantly recognizable and deeply comforting. It was the smell of pumpkin, pure and earthy. The sound of the spoon scraping softly against the inside of the pot was a gentle, rhythmic sound in the quiet room. Next, she opened another container, this one filled with a soft, grayish clay. She added a small amount of this to the pumpkin in the bowl. Her movements were precise and economical, yet unhurried, the gestures of someone who has performed this same loving ritual thousands of times. Then she turned to a series of even smaller bowls, each containing a finely ground powder. She took a tiny pinch from one, a warm reddish-brown spice, and sprinkled it into the bowl. The air immediately filled with the warm, sweet scent of cinnamon. She added another pinch, this time of a darker, muskier spice, and the rich, complex aroma of nutmeg joined the cinnamon, blending with the earthy pumpkin to create a perfume that was the very essence of autumn, of warmth, of home. The aroma was incredibly evocative, a scent that bypassed the conscious mind and spoke directly to a place of deep, comforting memory. It was the smell of a warm kitchen on a cool day, of baking and holidays and simple, joyful abundance. It was a scent that made the soul feel safe and cherished. This olfactory experience culminated in a complete release of any remaining tension. There was nothing to do, nothing to think about, only to lie on a bed of living moss and inhale the comforting perfume of the earth's gentlest spices. The guardian began to mix the ingredients together in the bowl, the wooden spoon making a soft, circular, scraping sound, a gentle and hypnotic rhythm that was the only sound in the world. It was the sound of care being made manifest, the music of a slow and loving preparation for healing. The soft rhythmic scraping of the wooden spoon against the ceramic bowl had become the gentle heartbeat of the room. It was a sound of patient, loving creation, a lulling and hypnotic whisper that had woven itself into the fabric of the deep quiet. And then, it stopped. The cessation of the sound was not abrupt or jarring, but a slow fading into a silence that was somehow deeper and more profound than before. The absence of that gentle rhythm created a vacuum, and into that space rushed a new and singular focus. The world, which had already shrunk to the confines of this warm and firelit cottage, now contracted even further, until it consisted of nothing more than the guardian, her hands, and the small earthen bowl she held. Time itself seemed to pause, holding its breath in anticipation of the next phase of this gentle ritual. She held the bowl in both hands, cradling it as if it were a precious offering. The firelight danced across its glazed interior, illuminating the final product of her careful work. The mask was a thick, homogeneous paste, the color of a pumpkin harvested in the golden light of a late autumn afternoon. It was a deep, warm, earthy orange, a color that was at once vibrant and profoundly comforting. Its surface was perfectly smooth, with a subtle, moist sheen that caught the flickering light and made it seem to glow with a gentle life of its own. A tiny, almost invisible wisp of steam rose from its surface, a fragrant and fleeting ghost that testified to the warmth held within the clay. To look at it was to see not just a mixture of ingredients, but the physical embodiment of warmth, nourishment, and the quiet, abundant beauty of the earth. The most powerful sensory detail in this moment of profound stillness was not a sound or a sight, but the fragrance that now filled the air with an unchallenged authority. While the individual notes of pumpkin, cinnamon, and nutmeg had been distinct during the preparation, they had now melded into a single, complex, and utterly harmonious perfume. It was a scent that was both sweet and spicy, earthy and warm, a rich and enveloping aroma that seemed to wrap around the senses like the softest of blankets. It did not hang in the air as a separate entity, but seemed to become a part of the air itself, infusing every breath with a sense of deep and abiding comfort. To inhale was to draw in the very essence of autumn, of harvest, of a hearth fire on a chilly evening. It was the scent of safety, of abundance, and of unconditional care. A wave of absolute trust, as warm and gentle as the firelight, washed over the soul. There had been no words spoken, no reassurances given, but the quiet, mindful, and loving way in which this simple mask had been prepared was a more powerful promise of good intention than any language could convey. Every gesture had been imbued with a sense of reverence and purpose. This was not a clinical application or a beauty treatment. It was a ritual, a sacred act of nourishment. The mind understood, on a deep and intuitive level, that what was being offered was not just for the skin, but for the spirit. It was a gift of comfort, a physical manifestation of the deep and gentle kindness that was the very foundation of this hidden sanctuary. This feeling of being so tenderly cared for brought forth a gentle cascade of contemplative thought. It was a meditation on the nature of nourishment. In the outside world, nourishment was so often reduced to a hurried act of consumption, a mere fueling of the body. But here in this quiet space, it was returned to its true meaning: to nurture, to sustain, to foster growth and healing. This fragrant paste, crafted from the fruits and spices of the earth, felt like a direct offering from the earth itself, a way of feeding the body with its own gentle goodness. It felt like a practice as old as time, a form of folk magic passed down through a long, unbroken line of wise women who understood that true healing comes from a deep and respectful connection to the natural world. The culmination of this quiet observation and inner reflection was a simple and profound sense of readiness. The body, already in a state of deep relaxation upon its bed of living moss, seemed to soften even further. The mind, already quieted by the peace of the forest and the cottage, let go of its last vestiges of analytical thought. There was no longer an observer and a participant. There was only a single, unified state of being, completely open and receptive to the care that was about to be given. A silent and heartfelt assent was given, a complete and willing surrender to the gentle hands of the guardian. It was a moment of perfect trust, a peaceful and grateful acceptance of the gift that was being so lovingly offered. The guardian, as if sensing this silent consent, set the bowl down on the small wooden table beside the bed. The sound of the ceramic touching the wood was a soft, dull click in the quiet room. She then looked at her own hands for a long moment, not in a way that suggested hesitation, but with a look of deep focus, as if preparing them for their sacred task. Her hands were beautiful, not in a delicate, manicured way, but in the way that things that are both strong and gentle are beautiful. The skin was etched with a fine map of lines, a testament to a life of work, of gardening, of healing. They were capable, knowing hands. She then dipped the tips of her fingers into the bowl, gathering a small, perfect amount of the warm, orange paste. Then began a small ritual within the larger one. She brought her palms together, and with the mask nestled between them, she began to move them in a slow, circular motion. It was not a brisk or hurried rubbing, but a deliberate and gentle rotation, a movement of loving preparation. The friction and the warmth of her own skin began to heat the mask even further, and as she worked it between her palms, a new, intensified wave of fragrance was released into the air. This was no longer the general room-filling aroma of before. This was a concentrated personal cloud of perfume, a warm and spicy exhalation that was directed and purposeful. The cinnamon seemed sharper and sweeter, the nutmeg more complex and musky, the pumpkin more deeply and earthily present. It was an act of waking the spirit of the spices, of preparing them to do their gentle healing work. The sensory consequence of this action was a dramatic heightening of anticipation. The fragrance, now so rich and immediate, was an irresistible promise of what was to come. It was a scent that made the eyes want to close, the better to focus on the olfactory world. It made the muscles of the face, which so often hold a subtle, unconscious tension, begin to soften in preparation. The warmth emanating from her hands, a combination of her own life force and the heat of the mask, could be felt in the air, a gentle and benevolent presence. The slow, rhythmic whisper of her palms moving against each other replaced the sound of the spoon in the bowl, becoming the new, lulling heartbeat of the moment. It was a sound of pure and gentle intention. Having warmed the mask to her satisfaction, the guardian turned and took a silent, fluid step towards the bed. Her movement was so graceful and quiet that she seemed to float over the stone floor, her soft robe making no sound. Her approach was not that of a practitioner to a client, but of a mother to a sleeping child. There was a profound tenderness in her presence, a sense of deep and protective care. As she drew near, her body cast a soft shadow, momentarily dimming the firelight and creating a more intimate, enclosed space. Her warmth preceded her, a subtle shift in the air that was as comforting as a physical touch. Her proximity was not an intrusion, but a welcome and reassuring presence. She paused beside the bed, a still and silent figure of calm. In her cupped hands, she held the warm, fragrant paste, a small offering of earthly comfort. The firelight from behind her created a soft halo around her form, illuminating the silver streaks in her braided hair. For a long, silent moment, she simply stood there, allowing her quiet presence to be felt, ensuring a state of complete calm and readiness. Her gaze was soft and focused, directed not at a face, but at the spirit she was tending to. This silent pause was a gesture of profound respect, a final unspoken question asking for permission to begin. And the soul answered with a silent, unequivocal "Jip." The preparatory action for the first touch was a subtle masterpiece of gentle care. Her hands, which had been cupped together, now separated slightly. One hand moved to hover just above the forehead, not yet touching, but allowing the radiant warmth from the mask and from her skin to be felt. It was a warm, gentle wave of energy, a ghost of a touch that sent a shiver of pure, pleasant anticipation through the entire body. The eyes closed, instinctively shutting out all other sensory input to focus completely on this imminent sensation. The body was utterly still, the breath soft and even, in a state of complete and willing receptivity. The world was reduced to the feeling of cool moss below, and the promise of warmth from above. Then, the touch. It came not with a jolt, but with the gentle, deliberate slowness of a leaf settling onto still water. The fingers of her hand, warm and coated with the smooth paste, made contact with the center of the forehead. The initial sensation was one of pure, blissful warmth. It was not a jarring heat, but a deep, penetrating warmth that seemed to seep through the skin and into the very bones, instantly dissolving any trace of tension. It was the kind of warmth that feels both ancient and profoundly alive. Immediately following the warmth came the sensation of the texture. The mask was incredibly smooth and silky, a fine velvety paste that glided over the skin, but within that smoothness was the very subtle, almost imperceptible grain of the clay, and the finely ground spices, a gentle reminder of its earthy origins. The final and most immediate consequence was the scent. With the mask now directly upon the skin, so close to the senses, the fragrance was an intimate and overwhelming cloud of pure comfort. It was no longer just in the air, but was a part of the self, a warm and spicy aura that enveloped the head and filled every breath. The perfume was so rich and evocative that it seemed to tell a story of golden fields and crackling fires, of loving hands and quiet kitchens, of the deep and simple abundance of the earth. The guardian's fingers began to move, spreading the warm paste in a slow, circular motion across the forehead, and with that gentle, loving touch, the world and all its cares dissolved completely, leaving only the profound and perfect peace of this single, sacred moment. The first touch had been a prelude, a gentle and promising introduction to a deeper peace. Now, with that initial warmth blossoming in the center of the forehead, the true ritual of the hands began. The guardian's fingers, which had rested for a moment in a gesture of serene stillness, began to move. It was a movement born of immense patience and a deep, intuitive understanding of the landscape of the human face. They did not rush, nor did they hesitate. They began to trace slow, deliberate circles, moving outwards from the center of the forehead in perfect, fluid symmetry. The pressure was exquisite, a flawless balance between a feather-light touch and a firm, grounding presence. It was the kind of pressure that communicates safety and expertise, a touch that invites the muscles beneath the skin to let go of tensions they have held for years. The warm, fragrant paste moved with her fingers, gliding over the skin in a smooth, continuous wave, a warm tide of comfort that spread slowly and inexorably outwards. The visual, though perceived only through the mind's eye behind closed lids, was one of beautiful, earthy artistry. A canvas of skin was being painted with the warm autumnal colors of the earth. The firelight flickered and danced, and in this imaginary view, it cast a soft golden glow upon the guardian's hands as they worked their slow and gentle magic. The orange of the mask, so vibrant and full of life, was being laid down in elegant swirling patterns. But the true experience was not visual. It was a symphony of the other senses. It was the feeling of the warmth spreading, chasing away the shadows of worry from the brow. It was the continuous, enveloping cloud of cinnamon and nutmeg, a scent that cradled the mind in a soft cocoon of memory and peace. It was the whisper-soft sound of her fingers moving through the smooth paste, a sound of pure, unadulterated care. A profound release began to take place in the muscles of the forehead, a place where the strains and stresses of the day so often gather into a tight, unseen knot. Under the slow, circular persuasion of her touch, this knot began to unravel, its threads loosening one by one. The warmth from the mask seemed to penetrate deeply, not just a surface heat but a therapeutic warmth that reached the weary muscles and invited them to surrender. It was a feeling of being smoothed out, as if the creases of worry were being gently and lovingly erased. The constant low-level hum of mental activity, the ceaseless inner monologue, began to fade, replaced by a simple, blissful awareness of the sensation of this healing touch. The mind had nothing to do, nowhere to go. Its only task was to receive this simple, profound gift of comfort. This sensation of being so tenderly cared for, this slow and rhythmic stroking of the forehead, tapped into a deep and ancient well of memory. It was the universal, half-forgotten language of comfort, the gesture of a loving parent soothing a child into sleep. It was a touch that spoke not to the adult mind, with its complexities and defenses, but to the innocent, vulnerable core of the self that simply yearns to be held and comforted. It was a feeling of being utterly safe, of being protected from all the harshness of the world. In this simple, repetitive motion, there was a powerful affirmation. You are worthy of this care. You are deserving of this peace. You can let go now. It was a message received not in words, but in the direct, irrefutable language of a gentle and knowing touch. The mind, now floating in a warm and fragrant sea of tranquility, let go completely. There was no more thought, no more analysis, only a deep and profound state of being. The gentle, circular motions became a mantra, a physical prayer for peace. The focus was entirely on the path of her fingers, following their slow and sacred dance across the skin. A silent sense of immense gratitude welled up in the heart, a thankfulness so deep and pure that it needed no expression. It was a gratitude for the hands that offered this healing, for the wisdom that guided them, and for the simple earthly ingredients that provided such profound comfort. It was a feeling of being perfectly in place, of having arrived at the very center of a deep and abiding calm. The guardian's hands continued their slow, hypnotic journey, moving from the broad expanse of the forehead to the delicate curved arches of the temples. Here, the pressure changed ever so slightly, becoming a little more focused, a little more intentional. Her thumbs joined in the dance, pressing with a gentle, steady firmness into the subtle hollows of the temples, a place where the weight of the world often seems to press inward. The warmth of the mask and the gentle circular pressure combined to create an exquisite sensation of release. It was as if a tightly wound spring was slowly being unwound, its stored tension dissipating into the warm, fragrant air. The release was not just physical. It felt as if mental pressure, the frantic energy of overthinking, was being drawn out and dissolved. Now her hands began the next phase of their journey, moving with an even greater delicacy and reverence as they approached the sensitive and expressive areas around the eyes. The broad, reassuring pads of her fingers gave way to the very tips, the touch becoming as light as the brush of a moth's wing. With an almost imperceptible pressure, she traced the fine, elegant curve of the brow bone, a slow, sweeping motion that was both calming and defining. Then, with that same feathery lightness, she moved to the delicate skin beneath the eyes, a place so often neglected and so full of a quiet weariness. Her touch here was barely a touch at all, a ghost of a sensation that was more a suggestion of movement than a physical pressure. It was a touch of pure respect, a silent acknowledgement of the vulnerability of this part of the face. The sensory consequence of this intricate and delicate work was a profound sense of lightness. The entire area around the eyes felt as if it were floating, the weight of 1,000 gazes and 1,000,000 sights lifted away. The gentle, tracing motions seemed to clear away a kind of psychic dust, leaving behind a feeling of clean and spacious clarity. The aroma of the mask was at its most intense here, so close to the nose, and each soft, gentle breath was a deep inhalation of its comforting perfume. To have this area treated with such meticulous and gentle care was to feel cherished in a very deep and personal way. It was an act of profound intimacy, a silent communication of trust and tenderness that was received with a quiet and grateful heart. From the delicate landscape around the eyes, her hands moved to trace the strong central line of the nose. A single fingertip, warm and coated in the smooth, fragrant paste, drew a straight, slow line from the bridge down to the very tip. It was a simple, grounding gesture, a stroke that seemed to anchor the floating senses and bring a sense of centeredness and balance. She then worked with incredible precision around the contours of the nostrils, her touch light and sure. This was not a hurried or functional application. This was a slow and loving exploration, an act of paying homage to the unique architecture of a face. Each small and often overlooked detail was given its moment of focused, gentle attention. Her journey then continued to the broad, soft planes of the cheeks. Here, the motion changed once again, becoming long, sweeping, and gracefully upward. Starting from the area beside the nose, her palms, now warm and smooth with the earthy paste, glided outwards and upwards over the cheekbones, towards the hairline. It was a beautiful, lifting motion, a gesture that felt both toning and deeply relaxing. The feeling was one of being gently sculpted, of the natural contours of the face being rediscovered and celebrated. She repeated this long, elegant stroke several times on each side, the rhythm slow and steady, the pressure firm but yielding. The sensation was one of being completely and lovingly held. With the cheeks now glowing with a gentle warmth, she moved to the final area of the face, the jawline. So much of the world's tension finds a home here, in the powerful muscles that clench and hold against the stresses of the day. Her hands seemed to understand this intuitively. She began with her thumbs, placing them just under the chin and beginning a series of slow, firm, upward strokes along the line of the jaw. The pressure was deeper here, more searching, as if seeking out the hidden knots of tension and gently persuading them to release. The warmth of the mask, combined with this firm, knowing pressure, worked a kind of magic, and a deep, profound letting go began to occur in the clenched muscles. It was a release that felt as if it traveled down through the neck and into the shoulders, a chain reaction of relaxation that spread through the entire upper body. The application was now almost complete. The entire face, from the top of the forehead to the curve of the chin, was covered in a warm, fragrant, and comforting blanket of the pumpkin spice mask. The sensation was one of being completely enveloped, held, and contained in a cocoon of earthly warmth. There was a subtle, pleasant tingling as the clay and spices began their gentle work. A feeling of being cleansed and purified from the outside in. The skin felt alive and breathing under its warm, moist layer. The feeling was one of utter completeness, of every part of the self having been seen, acknowledged, and tenderly cared for. The ritual had been a journey, and this was its beautiful, warm, and fragrant destination. To finalize this sacred ritual, the guardian performed one last, beautiful gesture. She disappeared for a moment, and there was the soft sound of water, followed by the gentle rustle of a soft cloth. She returned to the bedside, her hands now clean, and radiating a pure, natural warmth. She paused for a moment, a figure of serene stillness in the firelight. Then, with infinite slowness and gentleness, she placed her warm, dry palms onto the masked cheeks. She did not press or rub, she simply let them rest. The weight of her hands was almost nothing, but the warmth that flowed from them was a palpable and powerful force. It was a pure, unimpeded transference of benevolent energy, a warmth that seemed to travel through the mask, through the skin, and into the very core of the soul. This final touch was a seal, a blessing, a silent benediction. It was a gesture that said, "The work is done, now rest." It was a moment of perfect, unadulterated peace, a point of stillness in the turning world. The fire crackled in the hearth, the herbs hung silently from the rafters, and in this small, sacred alcove, a profound and healing connection was made through the simple, powerful language of a pair of warm and loving hands. The guardian held her hands in place for a long, timeless moment, and in that moment, the world dissolved. There was no body, no room, no past, no future. There was only the feeling of this profound and unconditional warmth, a silent and perfect contentment that was as deep and as vast as the quiet forest that surrounded this magical hidden sanctuary. The ritual was complete. The warm, silent resting of the guardian's hands was a final, perfect punctuation to the ritual. The moment stretched on, timeless and complete, before her warmth slowly, gently, receded. The feeling that remained was one of profound peace and a strange, pleasant weightlessness in the face. Another of the guardians, the one in the earth-brown dress, approached with a quiet, gliding step. In her hands, she carried a small ceramic basin of steaming water and a stack of soft, folded cloths. The steam that rose from the basin carried a clean, herbal scent, perhaps a touch of chamomile or yarrow, a fragrance designed to soothe and cleanse. She knelt beside the bed of moss, her movements as fluid and reverent as a priestess at an altar. She took one of the cloths, a piece of soft, unbleached linen, and submerged it in the warm water. The sound of the cloth entering the water was a soft, satisfying sigh. She wrung it out with a gentle twist of her wrists, and then, with infinite care, she unfolded the warm, damp fabric. The first touch of the cloth to the skin was a new and beautiful sensation. It was a soft, enveloping heat, a moist warmth that began to gently dissolve the drying mask. She did not scrub or rub, but simply pressed the cloth against the forehead, allowing its warmth and moisture to do the work. She held it there for a long moment, a warm and gentle compress that seemed to melt away the last vestiges of thought, before lifting it and revealing a patch of skin that felt impossibly clean and new. She repeated this process with a meticulous patience, using fresh cloths for each part of the face, gently pressing and lifting, until every trace of the pumpkin spice mask had been lovingly wiped away. With the ritual complete, the skin felt as if it were breathing for the first time. It was cool, soft, and alive with a new, vibrant sensitivity. It was the feeling of being utterly renewed, of having shed an old, tired layer and emerged fresh and clean. The woman in blue returned and, with a gentle smile, offered a hand. It was an invitation to rise, and the movement of sitting up from the moss bed felt slow and dreamlike. The body was suffused with a deep, languid relaxation, a pleasant heaviness in the limbs that spoke of a profound release of tension. Another silent gesture, a soft inclination of the head, guided the way back towards the cottage door. The journey felt different this time. The room, with its firelight and hanging herbs, seemed to glow with an even warmer and more benevolent light. It felt like a womb, a place of magical gestation from which one was now ready to emerge, reborn into a new state of calm, stepping out of the warmth of the cottage and back into the cool, evening air of the valley was a gentle and invigorating shock to the senses. The sun had dipped below the line of the ancient trees, and the world was now bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of twilight. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth, pine needles, and the cool mineral-rich fragrance of stone. It was a beautiful contrast to the warm, spicy perfume of the cottage, a sensory cleansing of the palate. The sound of trickling water, which had been a subtle background murmur before, was now much clearer and more present, a gentle, musical song that seemed to be drawing the senses forward, pulling them towards the source of its magic. The path led away from the cottage, across a soft lawn of moss, towards a grove of ferns and ancient silver-barked trees that stood at the far side of the hidden clearing. As the source of the sound grew nearer, a breathtaking scene unfolded, a sight of such unique and natural beauty that it seemed to belong to a dream. Nestled within the grove, arranged in a loose organic circle, were what looked like natural bathing pools. But they were not made of stone or tile. They were crafted from the hollowed-out trunks of colossal, ancient trees. Each tub was a masterpiece of nature's own design, a single, massive log, its exterior still covered in the gnarled, textured bark of its former life, thick with moss and lichen. The insides, however, had been hollowed out and smoothed over countless years to the soft, pale sheen of polished stone. They were positioned around a small, natural spring, where clear, warm water bubbled up from the deep earth, creating a constant, gentle overflow that fed each of the wooden tubs, before trickling away into a small pebble-lined stream. A soft, white mist rose from the surface of the water, a mystical living breath that swirled in the cool twilight air and caught the last, fading light of the day, making the entire glade seem to glow with a soft, internal luminescence. It was a vision of perfect harmony between the wild and the cultivated, a sanctuary that had not been built upon the land, but had been gently coaxed from it. There was no sense of human imposition, only a feeling of loving collaboration with the forest. The air was thick with the clean mineral scent of the thermal water, a smell that spoke of the deep secret places of the earth. The sound was a gentle symphony, the soft burbling of the spring, the quiet trickle of the overflow, and the whisper of the evening breeze through the leaves of the silver trees. A few fat, luminous bees, their work for the day now done, droned lazily through the rising steam, their low hum adding a deep, resonant note to the quiet music of the glade. To witness such a place was to feel the boundary between the ordinary world and the world of magic dissolve completely. A profound sense of wonder and gratitude filled the soul. This was a place of deep and ancient healing, a secret baptismal font hidden in the heart of the woods. The thought of immersing the body in that warm living water was an invitation of almost unbearable sweetness. It felt like the ultimate act of return, a chance to be held and cleansed by the very water that gave life to the forest itself. A deep, instinctual knowing arose, that to enter this water was not just to wash the skin, but to soothe the spirit on a much deeper, more fundamental level. It was an offering of a return to the source. The moment of preparation was a ritual in itself. Beside one of the largest log tubs, a flat, smooth river stone, warmed by the geothermal heat from below, served as a natural resting place. The heavy, cream-colored robe was untied, its soft fabric a final comforting caress against the skin, before it was allowed to slide from the shoulders and pool onto the warm stone. The feeling of the cool, twilight air on the newly cleansed skin was a sharp, exhilarating sensation, a brief and pleasant shock that awakened every nerve ending and prepared the body for the warmth to come. A deep breath was taken, an inhalation of the cool, clean, misty air, and then, with a slow and deliberate grace, the first step towards the water was taken. The entry was not a sudden plunge, but a slow and mindful immersion, a gradual surrender to the healing element. A series of shallow, mossy stones formed a natural staircase leading down into the hollowed log. The first foot slipped into the water, and the sensation was one of pure, unadulterated bliss. The heat was intense but not scalding, a deep, penetrating warmth that was profoundly comforting. It was a living heat, the warmth of the earth's own heart, as the body slowly lowered itself, inch by inch, into the water. A wave of relaxation so profound it was almost overwhelming spread through every muscle, every fiber of being. The water was silky and soft, heavy with dissolved minerals that made the skin feel instantly smooth and nourished. And then came the most magical sensation of all, the touch of thousands of tiny, golden flower petals, which had been scattered upon the surface of the water, and now floated like a silken blanket. They brushed against the skin like the softest of whispers, a delicate fragrant caress that was the very essence of gentle luxury. To be fully submerged in this warm, fragrant, petal-strewn water was to experience a state of perfect and absolute contentment. The body, freed from the relentless pull of gravity, felt light and buoyant, floating in a state of suspended grace. The muscles, which had already been softened by the massage, now let go completely, dissolving their last hidden knots of tension into the welcoming warmth. The water held the body in a perfect, gentle embrace, a liquid cradle that was both safe and liberating. The gentle steam rose around the head, enveloping the senses in a warm, moist cloud that carried the faint sweet perfume of the golden flowers and the clean, earthy scent of the water itself. From this vantage point, nestled deep within the ancient log, the world was transformed into a place of soft edges and muted sounds. The glade, with its rising mist and silver trees, seemed like a landscape from a beautiful, half-remembered dream. The mind, which had been progressively quieting throughout the journey, now fell into a state of profound and beautiful silence. There were no thoughts, no worries, no plans, no memories. There was only the sublime and simple reality of the present moment, a moment defined by the most gentle and pleasant sensations imaginable. The focus of this peaceful, thought-free awareness drifted to the surface of the water. Floating there, scattered amongst the golden petals, were several small round candles made from pure beeswax. Their wicks had been lit by one of the guardians, and their small steady flames burned with a clear, unwavering golden light. They drifted slowly on the gentle currents of the tub, their flames dancing and swaying with a slow hypnotic rhythm. Watching the gentle dance of the candle flames became the sole purpose of existence. Each flame was a small, bright point of life in the deepening twilight, a tiny, warm sun floating on a dark, silken sea. Their light reflected on the surface of the water, creating long, wavering trails of liquid gold that shimmered and broke with every tiny ripple. The flames illuminated the steam that rose from the water, making it glow with a soft, ethereal light, and they cast a warm, flickering glow on the pale, smooth wood of the tub's interior. The sight was mesmerizing, a simple and profound beauty that held the gaze and quieted the soul. The soft, sweet scent of melting beeswax mingled with the perfume of the flowers and the steam, creating a final perfect layer to this rich and immersive sensory experience. The consequence of this complete sensory immersion was a feeling of dissolution, of the boundaries of the self melting away. The warmth of the water and the warmth of the body seemed to merge, until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The slow, gentle pulse of the blood in the veins seemed to synchronize with the soft, steady flicker of the candle flames. The gentle, rhythmic burbling of the spring became the heartbeat of the earth itself. There was no separation, no sense of an individual self, only a feeling of being a small but integral part of this vast, peaceful, and interconnected whole. It was a state of grace, a return to a place of perfect unity and belonging, a deep and silent healing that took place in the warm, golden, candlelit heart of the enchanted forest. The world had dissolved into a warm, golden, liquid peace. Floating in the hollowed heart of the ancient tree, the body was a weightless, formless thing, suspended between the deep, mineral-rich heat of the water below and the cool twilight air above. The mind, unmoored from thought, had become a simple, placid mirror, reflecting the gentle dance of the candle flames that drifted on the water's surface. The only sounds were the soft, constant burble of the spring and the occasional, almost imperceptible whisper of a golden petal brushing against the skin. It was a state of being so pure and complete that it felt as if it could stretch on into eternity, a perfect and unbroken stillness. Within this stillness, a single, subtle thread of scent began to weave itself into the foreground of awareness. It was the perfume of the floating candles, the warm, sweet, and slightly floral fragrance of pure sun-warmed beeswax. It was a scent that was both simple and profoundly complex, a fragrance that held within its golden notes the memory of 1,000 flowers and the patient, alchemical work of 1,000,000 bees. It rose from the small, floating flames, mingling with the clean steam from the thermal water and the cool, pine-scented air of the encroaching night. And this scent, combined with the deep penetrating warmth that seeped into the very marrow of the bones, acted as a gentle, insistent key. It was a key that fit a lock deep within the heart, a lock that had been unopened for a very long time. As this key turned, slowly and without a sound, it did not release a flood of images or a torrent of specific thoughts. Instead, it opened a door onto a feeling. It was a feeling as warm and as golden as the candlelight, a diffuse and beautiful wave of pure, untarnished nostalgia, a sense of a long-forgotten love that began to glow softly in the center of the chest. This initial sensation was formless, a beautiful and poignant ache that had no name and no face. It was the emotional equivalent of seeing a warm light in a distant window on a cold night, a feeling of a home that was once known but whose location had been forgotten. It spread slowly from the heart outwards, a warmth that was distinct from the heat of the water, an inner sun that began to dawn in the quiet landscape of the soul. The mind, in its state of deep and receptive peace, did not try to grasp or analyze this feeling. It simply allowed it to be, to grow, to fill the empty spaces with its gentle, golden light. It was a feeling of being loved, of being safe, of a contentment so deep and simple that it belonged to another lifetime. The scent of beeswax was the anchor, and the feeling was the tide that rose around it, lifting the spirit on its soft and gentle swell. Then, slowly, as if a lens were being turned by an invisible hand, this beautiful nebulous feeling began to resolve into an image. The golden light began to coalesce, to take on a more specific character. It was not the flickering, dancing light of a candle flame, but the steady, patient light of a morning sun. It was a sunbeam, thick with dancing motes of flower, slanting through a clean mullioned window and falling upon a well-scrubbed wooden tabletop. The scene that emerged from the mists of time was a kitchen. It was an old kitchen, a place of warmth and substance, the true and steady heart of a long-ago home. And at the center of this sun-drenched scene, at the very heart of the memory, was a pair of hands. They were the hands of a grandmother, strong and capable, their skin a soft wrinkled map of a life lived with love and purpose. And these hands were working, engaged in the ancient and sacred ritual of making bread. The memory sharpened, becoming as vivid and as real as the warm water that cradled the body. The full image came into focus with an almost breathtaking clarity. There she was, a figure of serene and focused love, standing at the wooden table. She wore a simple flower-dusted apron. Her body was still, her entire being concentrated on the task before her. But it was her hands that held the story. They were not the frail, delicate hands of an old woman, but the powerful, competent hands of a matriarch, hands that had raised children, tended gardens, and created a universe of comfort and nourishment. And now, they were deep in a mountain of soft white dough, performing a rhythmic and hypnotic dance of push, fold, turn, and press. One could almost feel the beautiful, yielding resistance of the dough, the way it breathed and sighed under her expert touch. The image was silent, but it was filled with a profound and eloquent language of love. This powerful visual image then began to draw in the other senses. recreating the world of that kitchen with a perfect and poignant fidelity. The first to arrive was the smell. It was a smell as warm and as comforting as a hug, the rich, earthy, and slightly sweet scent of yeast, alive and active, the promise of the delicious bread to come. This scent mingled with the fainter, background aroma of old wood, of dried herbs hanging from a beam, and the subtle, clean smell of soap from the well-scrubbed floor. It was the unique and inimitable perfume of a happy and well-loved home, a scent that was synonymous with safety itself. To breathe it in, even in memory, was to feel a deep and fundamental sense of rightness with the world, a feeling that everything was exactly as it should be. Then came the sounds of that quiet, sunlit room. They were sounds as gentle and as comforting as the memory itself. There was the soft, rhythmic thud and sigh of the dough as it was worked against the floured board, a steady and reassuring heartbeat. And woven through this gentle rhythm was the sound of a voice, not speaking, but humming. It was a low, soft, and slightly wavering hum, a simple, familiar melody that was as much a part of her presence as the flower on her apron. The tune had no name. Its notes were not always perfect, but it was a sound of pure, unadulterated contentment, the unconscious music of a happy and peaceful heart. And beneath these two gentle sounds there was a third, a low and constant warmth made audible, the faint, deep hum of the old oven in the corner, already heated and waiting patiently for its precious burden. The memory was now a complete and immersive world, a perfect multisensory bubble of the past, existing within the warm, watery bubble of the present. And at the very center of this remembered world was not an event, not a conversation, not a particular day, but the pure, distilled essence of the feeling that this place, this person, this moment, had created. It was the feeling of absolute and unconditional security. It was the profound and unspoken knowledge that in this kitchen, in the presence of this love, nothing bad could ever happen. It was a universe of safety, a sanctuary built not of walls and a roof, but of the simple, powerful magic of a grandmother's love. It was a contentment so deep and so simple, that it required nothing more than to be a small child, sitting quietly in a sunbeam, watching the beautiful, rhythmic dance of a pair of loving hands. This feeling, this pure, golden essence of love and safety, was the true destination of the memory's journey. Having reached it, having bathed the soul in its warm and gentle light for a timeless moment, the image began to recede. It did not vanish abruptly, but faded with the same slow and gentle grace with which it had arrived. The sunbeam slanting through the kitchen window seemed to soften and dissolve, its golden light blending seamlessly with the flickering orange glow of the candle flames on the water. The rhythmic thud of the dough on the board and the soft, contented humming faded back into the gentle, musical burble of the thermal spring. The warm, yeasty scent of the kitchen air gave way once more to the clean, mineral perfume of the water and the cool, earthy fragrance of the forest at twilight. The memory was gone, but it had left behind a precious and beautiful gift. The warmth of that sunlit kitchen, the profound and unconditional love that had defined it, did not fade away. Instead, it remained, a glowing, radiant ember deep within the soul. And this inner warmth, this beautiful echo of a perfect and simple love, now merged with the physical warmth of the water. The two became indistinguishable, a single, unified field of comfort that was both physical and spiritual, present and past. The body floated in a thermal spring, and the soul floated in a sea of affectionate memory. The relaxation that had already been so deep now became something more, something richer and more profound. It was a peace that was not just of the moment, but was rooted in a deep and beautiful history. A peace that had been planted long ago in a sunlit kitchen, and had now, this magical candlelit glade, finally blossomed into its fullest and most beautiful form. The last warm golden echoes of the memory faded, not into a void, but into the even warmer, more present reality of the thermal water. The transition was seamless, a gentle dissolving of a dream into a state of being that was, in its own way, even more magical. The mind, having journeyed to a sunlit kitchen of the past, now returned to the twilit, candlelit glade of the present, and in that return, it saw the world with new eyes, perceived it with a new heart. The water was no longer merely water. The heat was no longer merely heat. The senses, heightened and purified by the journey of the day, now registered a deeper truth. The attention, which had been turned inward to the landscape of memory, now turned outward again, to the immediate, sensual reality of the floating embrace. The initial perception was of the sheer, living quality of the water itself. It felt ancient and full of a slow, deep wisdom. It had traveled from the secret heated places deep within the earth, carrying with it the memory of stone and the nourishment of 100 unseen minerals. To lie in it was not like bathing in a vessel of inert, heated liquid. It was like being held in a living, breathing part of the world. It was a direct and intimate communion with the planet. The warmth was not a simple temperature, but a transference of energy, a slow, steady infusion of the earth's own vitality. It was a kindness made liquid, a tangible and undeniable expression of a nurturing force that was as old as the mountains and as patient as the stars. The water moved with a silken slowness, caressing the skin not as a passive element, but as a gentle, active participant in the healing. The visual beauty of this reality was almost overwhelming in its simple perfection. The small golden flames of the beeswax candles continued their slow, silent ballet across the dark, glassy surface of the water. They were like tiny, wandering stars in a private galaxy. Their reflections stretched and shivered below them, doubling the light, creating a world of impossible liquid fire. The soft, white steam continued to rise, catching the golden light and transforming it into a luminous, swirling mist that softened the edges of the world, making the encroaching darkness of the forest seem gentle and protective rather than threatening. The pale, smooth inner walls of the hollowed log glowed with a warm, honeyed light, creating the feeling of being nestled within the heart of some great, golden living thing. The few scattered petals that remained floated like tiny golden boats, each one a small vessel of perfect, transient beauty. This renewed and deepened perception of the physical world gave birth to an immediate and overwhelming psychological response. It was not a thought, not a series of articulated words, but a silent, swelling wave of pure, unadulterated gratitude. It began deep in the chest, in the same place where the warm memory had glowed, and it expanded outwards, a silent song of thankfulness that filled every part of the being. It was a gratitude so profound and so complete that it felt like a form of prayer, a humble and heartfelt acknowledgement of the immense and beautiful gift of this moment, this place, this peace. It was a feeling of being a recipient of a grace so vast and so undeserved, that the only possible response was a silent, reverent awe. This wave of gratitude, vast and formless, then began to direct itself, to find a focus for its immense and gentle power. The first object of its attention was the forest itself. The mind sent a silent thank you out into the deep, quiet woods that surrounded the glade. It was a gratitude for its silence, for the profound and sacred quiet that had been the first and most essential step in the shedding of the noisy, anxious world. It was a thankfulness for the ancient trees that had filtered the light and scented the air, for the mossy path that had softened the footfalls and slowed the hurried pace. The forest was not just a backdrop, it was the guardian of this sanctuary, the keeper of its peace, and the first of the healers. The heart felt a deep sense of kinship with the trees, a feeling of being a welcome guest in their ancient, holy temple. From the forest, the wave of gratitude flowed towards the cottage, which now stood as a soft, warm silhouette against the darkening sky, a single, golden light glowing in its window. And this gratitude was for the three women, the silent, wise, and gentle guardians of this sacred space. It was a thankfulness for their smiles, for their graceful movements, for the profound and unconditional welcome that had needed no words. It was a gratitude for their knowing hands, for the ritual of the robe, for the artistry of the pumpkin mask, for the simple, profound gift of their care. They were like the human embodiments of the forest's spirit, their kindness as deep and as nurturing as the ancient earth itself. And finally, the gratitude turned its full, warm attention back to the water, this beautiful, living liquid that held the body in its warm embrace. It was a thankfulness for its purity, for its heat, for its mineral-rich touch, for the sense of deep and gentle cleansing that it offered not just to the skin, but to the very soul. With this feeling of profound and focused gratitude filling the heart, a simple, gentle action seemed appropriate. It was a preparatory gesture, a quiet acknowledgement of the expanding peace. The hands, which had been floating weightlessly at the sides, moved with a slow, dreamlike grace through the water, coming to rest, one over the other, upon the chest, directly over the source of this glowing, grateful warmth. The action was slow and deliberate, the water providing a soft, silken resistance that made the movement feel both intentional and effortless. The feeling of the warm palms against the skin, through the medium of the equally warm water, was incredibly comforting, a gesture of self-love and gentle containment. It was a way of holding the gratitude, of giving it a physical anchor. The main action was internal, a conscious and deliberate expansion of this feeling of thankfulness. The focus moved beyond the immediate and the local, and began to embrace the simple, fundamental, and so often overlooked beauties of existence itself. The gratitude, which had been directed at the forest, the guardians and the water, now widened its embrace, to include the very sensation of having a body. There was a sudden, profound appreciation for the simple miracle of clean skin, for the feeling of being unburdened by dirt or sweat or the heavy residue of a long and difficult day. It was a gratitude for the simple purity of being, a state so rarely achieved and so infrequently savored. The mind marveled at this simple, profound pleasure, a gift that was as fundamental as it was precious. The sensory consequence of this expanded focus was a heightened awareness of the immediate environment and the body's place within it. The gratitude extended to the cool night air. The deepening twilight was no longer just an absence of sun, but a gentle presence in its own right, a soft velvety blanket that was beginning to cover the world. The feeling of this cool, clean air on the face, a gentle and refreshing counterpoint to the deep warmth of the water on the body, was an experience of exquisite and perfect balance. And with the arrival of the night came a gratitude for the quiet that it brought, for the sense of the world settling down, of the day's frantic energy finally giving way to a time of rest and restoration. A single, bright star, the first of the night, pricked the deep, velvety fabric of the sky, a tiny, distant diamond of pure, cold light. This appreciation for the fundamental sensations of existence then deepened even further, settling on the most basic and essential act of all, the simple, miraculous act of breathing. The focus turned to the slow, steady rhythm of the breath, the gentle rise and fall of the chest beneath the resting hands. There was a profound and sudden gratitude for the feeling of air, clean and cool, entering the body, filling the lungs, and then being released in a slow, warm sigh. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the breath was completely unburdened. It was not shallow with anxiety, or hitched with worry, or hurried with stress. It was deep, slow, and perfectly free. To simply lie there, floating in the warm, dark water, under the first star of the evening, and to breathe, was a form of bliss, so simple and so profound, that it eclipsed all other desires, all other needs. This beautiful, silent symphony of gratitude culminated in a final, profound inner state. It was a feeling that transcended simple thankfulness and blossomed into a state of quiet, radiant joy. It was not a loud or ecstatic joy, but a deep, steady, and unshakable contentment. A silent and smiling peace that settled into the very core of the soul. It was the joy of being perfectly and completely present, of being in total harmony with the self and with the world. And with this joy came a sense of profound and gentle acceptance. It was an acceptance of everything. The past, the present, the future, with all of their imperfections and uncertainties. In this moment, in this warm and healing water, everything was exactly as it was meant to be. And from this place of joyful acceptance, a silent promise was made. It was not a vow of striving or of effort, but a gentle and serene resolution. It was a promise to the self to remember this feeling, to honor the profound truth that had been revealed in this sanctuary. This peace, this deep and abiding calm, was not something that existed only here. In this magical glade, in this healing water, it was not an escape from reality. It was, instead, a deeper and more fundamental reality, an inner truth that had simply been uncovered. The promise was to carry the essence of this quiet joy, this silent contentment, back into the world. It would not be a memory of an escape, but a living, breathing presence within the heart, an inner sanctuary, a place of calm to be revisited not by physical travel, but by a simple, quiet turning of the attention inward. A soft and gentle smile, the first outward expression of the inner state, formed on the lips. It was an unconscious and completely genuine response to the deep and silent joy that now filled the being. The eyes which had been watching the star now closed, sealing the image of its distant, steady light into the memory. The final action was a single, slow, and profoundly grateful breath. It was an inhalation that drew in the cool night air, the scent of beeswax, and the spirit of this sacred place, and an exhalation that released the last, invisible residue of the old unquiet self into the misty, twilight air. The culmination was a state of perfect and final stillness. The mind was as clear and as calm as the dark water's surface. The body was as relaxed and as deeply at rest as the ancient stones at the bottom of the spring, and the spirit was as bright and as peaceful as the single silent star that now watched over the hidden, magical heart of the forest. The quiet joy that had blossomed in the heart was a steady, gentle, and self-sustaining flame. It needed no fuel, no thought, no effort to keep it burning. It simply was. To float in the warm, dark water was to be suspended in a state of grace, so complete that the concept of time had ceased to have any meaning. The first star of the evening had been joined by 1,000 others, and the sky above the small sheltered glade was now a deep, velvety indigo, strewn with a fine dust of diamonds. The beeswax candles, having burned low, still flickered with a patient and beautiful light, their golden flames reflected in the still, dark mirror of the water. But within this perfect stillness, a gentle, unspoken intuition began to stir. It was not a thought, but a subtle, physical sense that this part of the journey was complete. It was time for the next, and final, stage of this silent, sacred healing. The decision to move was not a conscious one, but a slow, organic unfolding, like a flower closing its petals at the end of the day. The hands, which had been resting over the heart, slowly unclasped and drifted back to the sides, moving with a languid grace through the silken water. The body, which had been in a state of perfect, buoyant surrender, began to re-engage with a gentle and deliberate purpose. The hands found the smooth, submerged edge of the hollowed log, their grip sure and steady. The preparatory action was a single, slow, deep breath, an inhalation of the cool, clean, misty air, and an exhalation that was a silent farewell to the beautiful, watery embrace. Then, with a slow and fluid motion, the body began to rise. It was an emergence, a gentle birth from the liquid womb of the earth. The water cascaded from the skin in warm silvery sheets, 1,000 tiny rivulets that caught the candlelight and shimmered for a moment before falling back into the pool with a soft musical whisper. The sensory consequence of breaking the surface was immediate and exhilarating. The cool night air, which had before been a gentle caress on the face, now enveloped the entire body in a sudden, refreshing embrace. It was not a jarring cold, but a clean, crisp, and invigorating coolness that awakened every single nerve ending. The skin, heated from within by the deep warmth of the thermal water, tingled with 1,000 points of vibrant sensation. It was a feeling of being intensely, exquisitely alive, of the boundary between the self and the world being both perfectly defined and thrillingly porous. Standing for a moment on the mossy stone steps, with the water dripping from the limbs and the cool air raising a pleasant shiver on the skin, one of the guardians approached. It was the woman in the moss-green dress, her movements as silent and as graceful as the rising steam. In her arms, she carried a great, soft cloud of white fabric. It was a towel, but it was thicker, larger, and more luxurious than any towel imaginable. As she drew near, a palpable warmth radiated from it, and it was clear that it had been heated, perhaps by the stones of the cottage hearth. She did not speak, but her eyes held the same deep, gentle kindness as before. She unfolded the towel to its full, generous size, and with a slow and practiced gesture, she wrapped it around the body. The sensation was one of pure, unadulterated bliss. It was like being enfolded in a warm, dry cloud. The fabric was an incredibly thick and soft brushed cotton, and its immediate effect was to banish the cool shock of the air and replace it with a deep cocooning warmth. The towel absorbed the moisture from the skin instantly, leaving behind a feeling of profound comfort and security. It was a hug made of fabric, a swaddling that was both physically and emotionally comforting. She gently patted the shoulders and back through the thick material, a final, silent gesture of care. Before giving a slight, encouraging nod, indicating that it was time to move on. Wrapped in this magnificent, heated shroud, a feeling of deep and contented peace settled once more, a serene readiness for the final chapter of this magical night. The guardian in green led the way, not back towards the glowing window of the cottage, but along a new and unseen path that started at the edge of the fern-filled grove. This path was not made of mossy stones or floating wooden planks, but of the living roots of a single, colossal tree. It was an ancient oak, a true monarch of the forest. Its trunk so wide that it seemed less like a tree and more like a great, living tower. Its bark was a gnarled and intricate landscape of deep furrows and verdant patches of moss, and its branches, thick as a normal tree's trunk, reached up to scratch at the starry belly of the night sky. And winding around this magnificent, living pillar was a staircase. It was a spiral staircase, crafted from the same silvery, weathered wood as the walkway in the forest, and it climbed upwards, disappearing into the dark, leafy canopy of the great tree. The ascent began. The feet, bare and still warm from the bath, met the solid, reassuring texture of the wooden steps. The wood was not cold, but held a neutral, organic temperature, and its smooth planed surface was a pleasing contrast to the soft moss and hard stone of before. The climb was slow and unhurried, a gentle, spiraling journey upwards. With each step, the perspective of the world began to change. The beautiful, candlelit glade with its steaming pools shrank slowly below, becoming a secret, glowing jewel nestled in the dark heart of the forest. The gentle burble of the spring began to fade, replaced by a new sound, the soft, dry rustle of a million unseen oak leaves stirring in the night breeze. The air itself changed, losing its damp mineral scent and taking on the clean green and slightly bitter perfume of the leaves and the ancient woody fragrance of the oak's bark. This physical ascent was a powerful metaphor for a spiritual one. It was a journey away from the deep, watery, rounded energy of the earth and towards the light, airy and expansive energy of the sky. The higher the staircase climbed, the more the dense canopy of the surrounding forest fell away, and the more the vast open bowl of the night sky revealed itself. The stars were no longer small, distant points of light seen through a lattice of leaves, but great, brilliant, shimmering diamonds scattered across a canvas of infinite, velvety blackness. They seemed close enough to touch, their cold, ancient light a silent, breathtaking spectacle. There was a feeling of leaving the world behind, of climbing a sacred, winding tower towards a place of ultimate clarity and peace. It was a journey of profound and silent beauty, each step a further release into a state of light and spaciousness. Near the top of the winding ascent, nestled securely in the cradle of two of the oak's largest and most powerful branches, was a structure. It was a house, a small perfect cabin built amongst the leaves, a true house in the trees. It was crafted from the same warm silvery wood as the stairs, and it seemed to have grown there, a natural and organic part of the great oak. A soft, warm, golden light glowed from within a single, large, uncovered window, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the cool, starry night. The staircase ended at a small, sturdy platform before a simple, beautifully crafted wooden door. The guardian, who had led the way with a silent, steady grace, now paused. She placed a hand upon the door, turned, and gave a final, gentle smile of encouragement before opening it. The moment the door swung inward, a wave of sensation washed over the body. A feeling as powerful and as transformative as the first immersion into the thermal water. It was a wave of heat, but this was a heat of an entirely different character. It was not the moist, enveloping liquid warmth of the bath, but a clean, dry, and intensely penetrating heat that was utterly pure and profoundly cleansing. And with the heat came an aroma, a scent so powerful and so therapeutic that it seemed to scour the mind and spirit clean. It was the sharp, medicinal, and invigorating scent of eucalyptus, combined with the softer, sweeter, and more calming floral notes of lavender. The two aromas, released by the intense heat, had woven themselves together into a single purifying perfume that filled the small space and billowed out into the night air. To breathe it in was to feel the airways open, the mind clear, and a profound sense of inner cleanliness begin. The interior of the treehouse was a small, perfect jewel of rustic simplicity. The walls, the floor, and the ceiling were all made of a beautiful, pale, fragrant cedar wood, its smooth, polished surface glowing warmly in the soft light that came from a single, cleverly hidden lamp. Along one wall was a simple, low bench, also crafted from smooth, pale cedar. And in the corner, the source of the room's incredible heat was revealed. It was a deep iron basin filled with a mound of smooth, dark, river stones. The stones were not burning, but they radiated an intense, shimmering heat, glowing with a faint, deep red light from within, as if they held the embers of a dying fire in their core. The air in the room was still and thick with the heat and the fragrant herbal steam. And directly opposite the bench, a large, square window had been left wide open to the night, a perfect, living portrait of the star-dusted sky. The final act of shedding was to let the heavy, warm towel fall away. As the thick, cotton cloud pooled at the feet, the dry heat of the room immediately embraced the skin. It was an intense and prickling sensation, a dry fire that was not painful but profoundly and powerfully purifying. The body then moved to the smooth cedar bench, the wood hot to the touch but not unpleasantly so. To sit in this small, intensely heated room, high in the branches of an ancient tree, was to feel utterly removed from the world, suspended in a pocket of pure elemental sensation. The heat was relentless, a deep, penetrating warmth that seemed to travel past the skin, through the muscles, and into the very center of the bones. It was a heat that felt as if it were burning away not just physical impurities, but the last, invisible residues of sadness, of worry, of fear. The gaze was drawn, inevitably, to the open window. The view was magnificent, a perfect, unobstructed vista of the night. And then, as if on cue, a great silver disk began to rise above the distant, dark line of the treetops. It was the full moon, huge and impossibly bright. Its light so pure and so powerful that it seemed to drain the color from the world, leaving only a stunning high-contrast landscape of silver and black. Its cool, serene, and ancient light poured into the small, hot room, a beautiful and dramatic contrast to the warm, golden glow of the interior lamp. To sit in the intense, purifying heat of the sauna, and to watch the slow, silent, and majestic ascent of the full moon was a form of meditation so profound and so simple that it required no effort, no technique, no thought. A new sensation began. On the forehead, in the space between the brows, a single, tiny bead of moisture formed. It was quickly joined by another, and then another. A slow, single droplet of sweat traced a path down the temple. This was the final release, the ultimate act of purification. The body, superheated and completely relaxed, was now letting go of everything it no longer needed, everything it had held on to for too long. The process was not uncomfortable. It was a deep and satisfying surrender, a physical manifestation of the spiritual cleansing that had been taking place all day. The sweat that began to cover the skin was a river of release, carrying away the last vestiges of the outside world, leaving behind a state of absolute purity. To sit in the heat, to feel the body let go, and to watch the silent silver moon climb higher into the velvet sky, was to reach the very pinnacle of peace. It was a silent, solitary, and sacred culmination, a final, perfect moment of stillness and renewal in the warm, fragrant, moonlit heart of the treehouse sanctuary. The full moon was a silent, silver sun, bathing the world in a light that was not meant for seeing, but for dreaming. From the high open window of the treehouse sauna, the forest below was a landscape transformed, a world of sharp, silvered edges and deep, velvety shadows. The intense, purifying heat had subsided into a deep, penetrating warmth that resided in the very core of the bones, and the body felt impossibly light, clean, and new. A gentle internal signal, as soft and as certain as the rising of the moon, announced that the final part of the journey was about to begin. To leave this high airy sanctuary was not a sad departure, but a necessary and beautiful completion of a sacred cycle. Wrapped once more in the soft, warm towel, a single deep breath was taken, an inhalation of the last, fragrant wisps of eucalyptus and the cool, clean scent of the moonlit night. The descent was a slow, spiraling, and dreamlike procession. The feet bare and alive with a new sensitivity, found the smooth, solid wood of the winding stairs. The air, after the intense heat of the sauna, was a cool silken balm against the skin, a refreshing and exhilarating caress that was pure pleasure. It was a coolness that did not chill, but rather invigorated, bringing a tingling awareness to the surface of the body that felt like a quiet, joyful hum. The world unfolded in a slow rotation as the stairs wound their way around the massive trunk of the ancient oak. The moon was a constant serene companion, its light filtering through the intricate lace of the oak leaves, dappling the wooden steps with shifting patterns of silver and black. It was like walking down through a gentle, starry waterfall. The feeling was one of floating, of a profound and buoyant lightness, as if the body, having been purified by water and by fire, had shed its earthly weight, and was now composed of nothing more than moonlight and clean air. Reaching the bottom of the stairs and stepping back onto the soft, mossy ground of the glade was a moment of gentle grounding. The cool, damp moss was a soft and welcoming carpet underfoot. The world from this perspective was hushed and reverent. The thermal pools were dark, still mirrors, their steam now just a faint silvery mist that rose to meet the moonlight. The candle flames had long since extinguished themselves, leaving behind a deep and peaceful darkness. The cottage, across the clearing, was a warm and welcoming silhouette. Its single window, a patch of soft, golden light, a beacon calling the traveler home. The guardian in the moss-green dress was waiting, a figure of silent, patient grace. She did not speak, but led the way with a soft, guiding hand on the elbow, a touch that was both reassuring and respectful. The final walk across the mossy ground was a slow and silent pilgrimage, a journey of a few dozen feet that felt like the final, sacred steps to the very center of peace. The heavy wooden door of the cottage swung open, and the transition from the cool, silvered world of the night to the warm golden world of the interior was a final, beautiful sensory embrace. The air inside was not hot, but held a deep, gentle, and radiant warmth that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. The great fire in the hearth, which had earlier been a lively, crackling blaze, had now burned down to a deep and tranquil bed of glowing embers. There were no more flames, no more smoke, only a silent, pulsing heart of deep ruby-red light that cast a soft, steady, and profoundly peaceful glow throughout the room. The light was gentle on the eyes, a soft and forgiving illumination that smoothed all the edges of the world. The air was still thick with the comforting sense of old wood, dried herbs, and the faint, sweet memory of beeswax, a perfume of ultimate and final safety. In the center of the room, positioned to receive the gentle warmth of the embers, was a large, deep armchair. It was not merely a piece of furniture. It was a nest, a throne of rest that had been lovingly prepared for this very moment. It was an old chair, its wooden frame dark and smooth with age, but its substance was one of pure, yielding softness. It was filled with a mountain of plump, down-filled cushions, and draped over it, in soft, inviting folds, were several thick, heavy blankets woven from the softest wool. It was a picture of perfect, unassailable comfort, an open invitation to a final and complete surrender. The guardian guided the way to this beautiful haven of rest, and with a final warm smile that was full of a deep and silent understanding, she gave a gentle nod, a signal that this was the final destination, the place of ultimate repose. The ritual of settling in was as slow and as mindful as every other part of the day's journey. The warm, soft towel was laid aside, and the body, clean and light, sank into the waiting embrace of the armchair. The cushions sighed and yielded, molding themselves around the limbs, creating a feeling of being held in a soft, warm and supportive cloud. The sensation was one of pure, blissful surrender, of a weight being lifted that one had not even been aware of carrying. One of the heavy, woolen blankets was drawn up, its comforting weight a final, grounding pressure that seemed to anchor the floating spirit gently back into the peaceful body. The texture of the wool was soft and slightly rustic against the skin, a final, pleasant sensory detail in a day that had been so full of them. To be here, in this chair, wrapped in this warmth, in this deep and gentle quiet, was to have arrived at the very heart of contentment. Just as a deep and profound stillness was beginning to settle, one of the other guardians, the woman in the twilight blue dress, approached. She moved with her characteristic silent grace, a calm and gentle presence in the emberlit room. In her hands, she carried a single object, held with a reverence that elevated it from the mundane to the sacred. It was a cup, a beautiful, simple piece of handmade pottery. It had no handle, but was shaped like a small, round bowl, designed to be held and warmed by two hands. Its glaze was the color of a night sky, a deep, dark blue, but it was alive with a galaxy of tiny, lighter specks that caught the red glow of the embers and shimmered with a subtle, mysterious light. A thin, fragrant wisp of steam rose from the cup, a pale dancing ghost in the soft light, carrying with it a promise of the warmth held within. She knelt beside the chair, a gesture of profound and humble service, and offered the cup with both hands. It was a final gift, a last act of loving care. The preparatory action was to reach out and receive it. The hands, now completely relaxed and sensitive, moved to accept the offering. The main action was the moment of contact, the transference of the cup from her hands to the recipient's. The ceramic was warm, a deep and pleasant heat that was not hot enough to burn, but was powerful enough to feel like a living thing. The cup had a pleasing weight, a sense of substance and earthy reality. It fit perfectly into the cupped palms, a sphere of warmth that seemed to radiate a gentle healing energy directly into the body. To simply hold it was a form of therapy, a final anchoring point of warmth and comfort in a world that had become completely soft and serene. The sensory consequence of this final ritual was a quiet and beautiful symphony. First there was the warmth, a deep and steady heat that seeped into the palms and traveled up the arms. A final, gentle wave of relaxation. Then the cup was lifted slowly towards the face, and the fragrance of the steam was inhaled. It was a scent as calm and as gentle as the moonlight, a soft and soothing blend of chamomile, sweet lavender, and a faint bright hint of lemon balm. It was the perfume of sleep itself, a fragrant lullaby that quieted the last, lingering whispers of the conscious mind. A small, careful sip was taken. The tea was not sweet, but it was full of a deep, floral, and herbal flavor that was profoundly comforting. It was the taste of a summer meadow at dusk, the taste of peace. The warmth of the liquid spread from the inside out, a gentle, blossoming heat that met the warmth of the blankets from the outside in, creating a perfect and unassailable core of comfort. With the last, warm sip of the tea finished, the now empty cup was placed on a small, low wooden table that stood beside the chair. The final act was one of complete and utter surrender. The head, which felt as heavy and as peaceful as a smooth river stone, leaned back and sank into the deep, soft cushions. The blankets were pulled up a little higher, creating a safe and warm cocoon. And then, with a final, slow exhalation that seemed to carry away the last lingering trace of the self, the eyes closed. The world of sight dissolved, replaced by a soft and gentle darkness. The only remaining sensations were the deep, radiant warmth of the embers, the comforting weight of the blankets, and the profound, absolute silence of the cottage. This silence, however, was not empty. It was filled with the quiet, subtle music of deep peace. From the hearth came the occasional soft pop and sigh of a cooling ember, a gentle, rhythmic punctuation in the stillness, like the slow, sleepy heartbeat of the house itself. And from beyond the thick wooden walls, from the deep and ancient forest now bathed in the silver light of the full moon, there was a sound that was the perfect absence of sound. It was the deep, resonant, and holy silence of a wilderness at rest. To listen to this gentle duet, the soft, dying fire within, and the vast, peaceful quiet without, was the final meditation. The mind did not cling to these sounds, but simply allowed them to be, a final, gentle wave on the shore of consciousness. The wave receded, and then another, even softer one followed, and then another, each one quieter than the last, until finally, the listener, the house, the forest, and the night all merged into a single, seamless, and profoundly beautiful state of absolute repose. The journey was over. The destination was a sleep as deep, as dark, and as peaceful as the ancient, silent earth. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with us. It is in these small, peaceful routines that we can find our calm. If this story brought you a little bit of comfort, a like and a subscription helps our bookshelf grow and reach others who might need a peaceful story tonight. We have another tale waiting for you very soon. Until then, sleep well.